The story you are about to witness is not about money, it's about memory. It says about the corrosive power of arrogance and the cold precision of a revenge served after years of waiting. Pay close attention to the details. They are the key to the twist you won't see coming. It all began 7 years ago, in an office on the 40th floor, where the thin air of the altitude matched the inflated ego of its occupant. Victor Hayes, the CEO of NovaTech, a rising giant in the software market, was the personification of success, impatience, and above all, arrogance. He was the type of man who wore suits that cost his employees annual salaries and believed that respect was something you demanded, not earned. On that day, he was sitting at his imposing glass desk while a young intern, Leo, trembled slightly in front of him. Leo wasn't shaking from fear, but from a nervous anticipation that youth and great ambition provide. Leo was a genius, but the only thing Victor saw was the cheap fabric of his blazer and the lack of an influential last name. Leo had spent 4 months drafting a proposal he believed was the future of NovaTech, an open-source platform to democratize access to technology, a visionary project that promised to change how the world interacted with data. He'd worked all night, slept under the flickering light of the computer screen, driven by the belief that his ideas, not his social status, would make the difference. He saw Victor not just as a boss, but as a potential mentor, someone who would understand the value of a legacy that transcended immediate profit. This naivete, this faith in a superior vision, was, in Victor's cold eyes, his greatest weakness. Victor barely glanced at the printed pages Leo laid out on the desk. His attention was fixated on a breadcrumb that had fallen onto his silk scarf, imported from Italy. He caressed the fabric, his forehead furrowed in a sign of deep displeasure. That silent contempt, the way Victor prioritized a trivial flaw in his luxury accessory over months of work from a young idealist, was Leo's first blow. A blow that struck not his body, but his pride. Victor finally sighed, a sound of unbearable boredom, and pushed the papers back toward Leo with the tip of a solid gold pen, whose gleam seemed to mock the simplicity of the proposal. The metallic sound on the low-quality paper was an echo of humiliation in the room. Victor spoke, his voice a controlled murmur that contained a mountain of scorn. "Leo, right? You dress like a computer repair guy and dream like an idealist. NovaTech doesn't trade in the future, Leo. It buys the present. Your project is naive. It's charity, and charity doesn't pay the bills for my penthouse in Manhattan. My vision is clear, profit above all else. Your democratization is a virus that kills exclusivity, and exclusivity is what sustains this empire. You're fired, not for lack of intelligence, but for lack of vision. Vision to understand that in this world, passion is irrelevant. Power is everything, and you, Leo, have none." Victor offered a dry, perfect-toothed smile, the smile of a man who knows he has just dictated a sentence with no chance of appeal, a smile Leo would engrave in his mind with the clarity of a photograph. That smile was the second and deepest blow, the moment when Leo's naive ambition transformed into a cold, calculating rage. Leo collected his papers, his hands now steady, braced by a newfound resolution. His voice did not tremble when he replied, with a calm that even surprised Victor, though Victor quickly dismissed it. "I got the lesson, Mr. Hayes. I understand that power is everything." Victor simply nodded, already dialing his phone, closing the matter as if flipping a switch. He didn't even wait for Leo to leave the room, returning to discuss preparations for a golf trip to Palm Beach. Leo left that room, but it wasn't just an intern who walked out. It was the seed of a slow and meticulous revenge that had just been planted. He rode the 40 floors down in the glass elevator, looking at the city below, not with the wonder from before, but with the coldness of a strategist mapping a battlefield. Victor had given him the most valuable lesson of his life. In this world, kindness is mistaken for weakness. Leo swore to himself that the next time he entered that room, he wouldn't be trembling with nervousness, but Victor Hayes would be trembling with fear. Over the next 7 years, the name Leo disappeared from tech circles, but a shadow began to move behind the scenes of the global financial market. As Victor Hayes continued to flaunt his empire with sports cars and opulent penthouse parties, he failed to notice that his success was being, almost invisibly, dissected and packaged for sale. What Victor didn't know was that Leo was, in fact, Leonard Maxwell, the secret billionaire heir to a European investment fund that operated with the discretion of a ghost and the precision of a surgeon. Leo's family had always valued humility and anonymity, and he had been at NovaTech on a whim, seeking validation for his project, not his last name. Victor had not only rejected him, he had humiliated the only ambition Leo had tried to build with his own effort. Leo's plan was simple in its coldness and complex in its execution. He would not destroy NovaTech. He would buy it piece by piece, ensuring that the final blow was not financial, but personal. He used the Marshall Group, a fund he had renamed in honor of a former tutor who had taught him about patience and chess, to begin the slow acquisition. In the first 3 years, he focused on buying NovaTech's suppliers and smaller competitors, quietly strangling the company's supply chain. Every action was a chess move, executed with the calmness of someone who can wait for the piece to fall. He had the money to make the purchase all at once, but that would be too easy. Victor wouldn't feel the pain. Revenge, he knew, was only sweet when it was prolonged. In those early years, Victor felt only a nagging itch. Some small investors were being replaced by anonymous funds, and a few of his most reliable suppliers were being swallowed by strange competitors. But he was too busy closing grand contracts and accepting business awards to worry about the market's small sharks. His internal monologue was one of self-praise, reinforcing his megalomania. "No one is smart enough to touch my company. I am Victor Hayes, the untouchable." His arrogance was his fortress, and ironically would be his greatest weakness. He believed his empire was made of concrete, when in reality Leonard Marshall was turning it into sand. In the 4th and 5th year of the plan, Leonard took the second step, quietly buying small slices of NovaTech on the open market. He used different brokerages, shell companies on different continents, ensuring that the ownership looked like a scattered mosaic, not a single buyer. Anxiety began to corrode Victor. He started to feel a strange pressure, a sense that the company was moving on its own, ignoring his orders. His paranoia mounted. He fired 3 financial analysts for failing to identify the source of the capital. He began yelling at his executives. His iron patience melted into liquid paranoia. "Find out who Marshall is. I want the name, the address, the school records. Nobody touches my company," he would scream, shattering coffee cups on the glass table. The scent of his expensive cologne could no longer mask the smell of his fear. The turning point, the first strategic hook for the audience, came in the 6th year. The Marshall Group, until then unknown in the area, bought a crucial 15% stake in NovaTech, enough to demand a seat on the board and, more importantly, enough to permanently disrupt Victor's sleep. Victor tried everything to find out who was behind the Marshall Group, but it was like chasing a shadow. Every door he knocked on led to a more complex shell corporation. He was used to having absolute control, to knowing who his enemies were. Now he felt the pressure of an invisible competitor, someone playing his game, but with rules he didn't understand. He consulted prohibitively expensive lawyers who came up empty. The frustration of being incompetent for the first time was consuming him. He was filmed in a close-up, his face tense, the worry lines deepened, contrasting with old photos of him smiling at success parties. The coup de grace was announced in a cold, legal letter. The Marshall Group called an emergency board meeting to vote on a change in executive leadership, and a realignment of corporate vision. The tone of the letter was professional, but the intent was a gut punch to Victor. Victor was panicking, but his arrogance prevented him from retreating. He had to fight. He convinced himself that this Leonard Maxwell was just a rich newcomer who would be easily intimidated by his presence and his track record of success. He prepared an hour-long speech, exalting his genius and belittling anyone who dared question him. He wore his most expensive suit, tied his most ostentatious tie. He needed to look invincible, even though he was crumbling inside. Victor's humiliation had already begun. Leonard Maxwell arrived with the punctuality of a guillotine. He didn't walk in, he glided through the boardroom door. He was dressed in a tailor-made suit, impeccable, with a subtle cut, but made of a fabric Victor would recognize as being more expensive than his own. It was a silent power, a power that didn't need to shout. He had a calmness that bordered on indifference. And ironically, he wore thin-rimmed glasses, identical to the ones Leo wore during his internship. Victor, consumed by vanity and tension, didn't make the connection. He only saw a successful rival. The meeting began with Victor barking. He launched into his hour-long speech, full of veiled insults about inexperienced youth and a lack of traditional vision. He spoke with his hands, gesturing to the board members, trying to reassert his physical dominance over the room. Leonard merely watched, with a gaze that seemed to analyze his opponent like an insect under a magnifying glass. Leonard waited patiently, the serenity on his face a brutal contrast to the redness of Victor's skin. When Victor finally fell silent, exhausted from his own eloquence and feeling the room's silence like an accusation, Leonard took the floor. Leonard spoke, and his voice was low, precise, with no New York or Wall Street accent. A global voice, one who stands above the tribes. He didn't argue against Victor's speech, he demolished it with facts and figures, revealing strategic flaws that only someone who knew NovaTech from the inside, from its very guts, could know. He mentioned the obsolescence of the company as main platform and the true cost of failed partnerships that Victor had hidden. Little by little, Victor began to sweat. Those flaws, they were internal details, mistakes he had hidden even from the board. Victor's panic intensified, and he finally interrupted Leonard with a desperate yell. "Who the hell are you? Are you a spy? You know this company inside and out. Who sent you?" Leonard smiled, a subtle smile, but one that held no joy, only the cold satisfaction of the executioner. He made a slow, calculated movement. He took off the thin-rimmed glasses, placed them on the table, and looked Victor straight in the eye. His eyes hadn't changed. They were the same genius eyes, but now hardened by pain and revenge. The connection was made. The air in the room became suffocating. Leonard began to speak, but not with the tone of an investor, with the tone of a judge. His voice now carried the memory of 7 years of pain. "I am Leonard Maxwell," he said before continuing with Victor's exact words, spoken in that room 7 years earlier. "You dress like a computer repair guy and dream like an idealist. NovaTech doesn't trade in the future, Leo. It buys the present." He paused, allowing the humiliation of the past to echo in the present. "Do you remember that, Mr. Hayes? Those were your words. My name isn't Leonard, Mr. Hayes. My name is Leo, the intern you dismissed for being naive, the intern who lacked vision and power." Victor crumbled. His body shook, his hands clutching the edge of the table. He tried to deny it, but Leo's cold gaze was a mirror of the truth. "No, impossible. You were a nobody, a poor intern," Victor stammered, his face white. Leonard cut him off with the precision of a knife strike. 7 years, Victor. You thought power was money, but true power is patience and memory. You taught me that power is everything. I simply used your lesson against you. Your mistake wasn't firing me, it was underestimating me. It was crushing the dignity of someone who couldn't fight back. I could have bought NovaTech in 3 days, but I waited. I waited until every mistake you made, every act of arrogance became a nail in the coffin of your control. NovaTech will be purchased, it will be restructured, and the project you called naive, that open source project, will be the company's new vision. But you, Leo smiled, the smile of cold justice. You won't be a part of it. I'm not taking your money, Victor, Leonard said, leaning on the table and looking down at him. You can keep your money. I'm taking your dignity, your legacy, and above all, the control over the only thing you truly love, your empire. You won't just be fired, you will be forgotten. And the board. He turned to the room, where the other members were in silent shock, but with looks of relief at being rid of the tyrant, has just voted unanimously for my ascent to leadership and for your immediate removal. Your access to the network and company systems was revoked while you were speaking. Victor Hayes was escorted out of his own company by 2 discreet security guards, the expensive suit suddenly looking like a ridiculous disguise. He was no longer the predator. He was the prey. As the elevator doors closed, the last thing he saw was Leonard Maxwell, the former intern, taking his place at the table, not with joy, but with a resolute calm. The revenge was complete, and Victor Hayes' lesson was learned bitterly and irreversibly. The story of Leonard and Victor teaches us that arrogance has a cost, and that true power lies not in the money you possess, but in the respect you lose and the patience you cultivate. Leonard didn't seek wealth, he sought the correction of injustice. Victor lost not just a company, but the belief that he could treat people as disposable pieces, and that for him was the greatest bankruptcy. Leonard, now CEO, looked out the 40th floor window, no longer viewing the city with Victor's arrogance of possession, but at the horizon, contemplating humility. He retrieved the old open-source project, a symbol that the focus is not on power, but on the original vision. He knew revenge was a dish best served cold, but the satisfaction of having restored his dignity and the dignity of his vision was a warmth that money could never buy. From that day on, NovaTech would become proof that vision and humanity can coexist with success. This was the true twist Victor never saw coming. And what about you? Do you believe Leonard went too far with his revenge? Should he have accepted his family's money and ignored Victor? Or was public humiliation the only way for Victor to learn his lesson? What would you have done in the place of the humiliated intern? Leave your honest comment below, as your opinion is the heart of our community and fuels the moral debate behind these stories. If this narrative of a twist, justice, and overcoming adversity resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our next amazing stories. And of course, like the video to help us keep bringing you tales of power and redemption like this one. Thanks for watching.